Sir, I'm just waiting for the video to start sinking in. 1 minute, sir. Okay, sir. Now we will go live. Namo Ramana. A very warm welcome to all the devotees at Ramana Kendra Delhi's Sunday Satsang. We shall be listening to Raghav ji for his talk later in the evening. I would now request Narayanan ji to commence with puja. Sir.
अच्युताय नमः, मुकुंदाय नमः, गोविंदाय नमः। शुक्लांबरधरं विष्णुं शशिवर्णं चतुर्भुजं प्रसन्नवदनं ध्यायेत् सर्वविघ्नोपशान्तये। अयमूर्तसमुसर्दोऽसुसंबन्धो बन्धो नो प्रणन्दो अयमूर्तसमुसर्दोऽस्तु तदेव लगनं सदिनं तदेव ताराबलं चन्द्रबलं तदेव विद्याबलं दैवबलं तदेव लक्ष्मीपदे ते तेङ्ग्रियं स्मरामि। ओं भो ओं भुव ओं सुव ओं मह ओं जन ओं तव ओं सत्यं ओं तत्सर्ववर्णीयं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो न प्रचोदयात्। ओम आवज्योतिर्समृद्धमुर्वस्वरम् ममोपात समस्त दुर्ग चैत्वारासी परमेश्वर की तीर्थम करिष्यमाणस्य कर्मण निर्वैरेण प्रसन्नतादो विघ्नेश्वरो न कर्ष्ये। पृथ्व्यां वेण्टुरुले सुदन्तवर्मो देवता पृथ्वी दिया तथा लोकादेशं विष्णुनाथुला स्वयं सतारे मां देवी गोत्रं गुरुसागरम् आगमार्थं तु देवानां कमनार्थं तु रक्षार्थं भण्डारवं करां यादव देवदवाननाञ्जनम् नमोपात समस्त दुर्गा चैत्वारासी परमेश्वर की तीर्थम निर्बंधा सिद्धम आदो विघ्नेश्वर पूजां करिष्ये। गणानाथा गणपति गुम्मवामये कविं गवीनावम सत्रम ज्येष्ठराजं ब्रह्मणां ब्रह्मणस्पद आनुष्ठुनुपुष्टिसाधनम् अस्मिन् दर्शनाबिम्बे महागणपतिं ध्यायामि महागणपतिं भावामयामि। ओम महागणपतिये नमः आसनं समर्पयामि। ओम महागणपतिये नमः अर्घ्यं समर्पयामि। ओम महागणपतिये नमः पाद्यं समर्पयामि। ओम महागणपतिये नमः आचमनीयं समर्पयामि। ओम महागणपतिये नमः उपचारिकस्नानं समर्पयामि। ओम महागणपतिये नमः स्नानानन्तरम् आचमनीयं समर्पयामि। ओम महागणपतिये नमः वस्त्रदानं अक्षतां समर्पयामि। महागणपतिये नमः यज्ञोपवीतार्थम् अक्षतां समर्पयामि। ओम महागणपतिये नमः गन्धां धारयामि समर्पयामि। ओम महागणपतिये नमः गन्धोपरियक्षतां समर्पयामि। ओम महागणपतिये नमः अङ्गनाथम् अक्षतां समर्पयामि। ओम महागणपतिये नमः हरिद्रा कुङ्कुमं समर्पयामि। ओम महागणपतिये नमः पुष्पै पूजयामि। ओम सुमुखाय नमः। ओम एकदन्ताय नमः। ओम कपिलाय नमः। ओम गजकर्णकाय नमः। ओम लंबोदराय नमः। ओम विघ्नाय नमः। ओम विघ्नराजाय नमः। ओम विनायकाय नमः। ओम धूमकेतवे नमः। ओम गणाध्यक्षाय नमः। ओम बालचंद्राय नमः। ओम गजाननाय नमः। ओम वक्रतुंडाय नमः। ओम शूर्पकर्णाय नमः। ओम हेरंबाय नमः। ओम स्कंदभूर्जवाय नमः। ओम सिद्धविनायकरे नमः। ओम शंकरमोक्षविनायकरे नमः। ओम मातुपुरविनायकरे नमः। ओम महागणपतिये नमः। नानाविध फलपत्र पुष्पाणि समर्पयामि। धूपार्थं समर्पयामि। दीपार्थं समर्पयामि। अक्षतां समर्पयामि। ओम भूर्भुवस्सुवः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो न प्रचोदयात्। देवदत्तप्रसव सत्यं तन्नेन पठनामि। अमृतस्वं स्वाहा। ओम प्राणाय स्वाहा। ओम अपानाय स्वाहा। ओम ज्ञानाय स्वाहा। ओम उदानाय स्वाहा। ओम समानाय स्वाहा। ओम ब्रह्मणे स्वाहा। महागणपतिये नमः। महागणपतिये नमः। महागणपतिये नमः। पुरगण्डनाट्यचक्रनैवेद्यं समर्पयामि। मध्ये मध्ये पानीयं समर्पयामि। अमृतोपसां सूत्रापोसं समर्पयामि। कर्पूरं समर्पयामि। नमो नमो गणेशाय। नमस्ते विश्वरूपिणे। निर्विघ्नं कुरु मे कार्यं। नमामितं गजानन। अभिजानपद्मार्कं गजाननमहर्निशम् अनेकदन्तं भक्तानाम् एकदन्तम् उपास्महे। महागणपतिये नमः। महागणपतिये नमः। महागणपतिये नमः। कर्पूरं समर्पयामि। नीराजनं समर्पयामि। नीराजनानन्तरम् आसमनीयं समर्पयामि। महागणपतिये नमः। महागणपतिये नमः। महागणपतिये नमः। वक्रतुंड महाकाय सूर्यकोटि समप्रभ निर्विघ्नं कुरु मे देव सर्वकार्येषु सर्वदा। गणपति प्रसादं सरसा करोमि। ओम ओम शुभ ओम जनम तव ओम सत्यम ओम तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो न प्रचोदयात्। ओम अवधूत संभ्रमस्वरम्। ममोपात समस्त दुर्ध चैत्वारा परमेश्वर पित्यतम सुबे सोमने मूर्ते आद्य ब्रह्मण द्वितीय परार्थे श्रीवेदे वराह कल्पे वैवस्वत मन्वंतरे अष्टाविंशतितमे कलियुगे प्रथमे वादे जम्बूद्वीपे भारतवर्षे भरतखण्डे मेरो दक्षिणे पार्श्वे सगात्ते अस्मिन् वर्तमाने व्यावावृके प्रवादिनां षष्ट्या संवत्सराणां मध्ये शोभकृतनाम संवत्सरे दक्षिणायने वर्ष ऋतु सिंह मासे शुक्लपक्षे चतुर्थी तिथियां सुबदितौ भानुवासर युक्तायां अस्ता नक्षत्र युक्तायां शुभ नक्षत्र शुभ योग शुभ कर्ण एवं गुण विशेषिण विशिष्टायां अस्यां चतुर्थी तिथियां सुबदितौ मम जन्म प्रति एतच्चन पर्यन्तं मध्ये संभावितानां सर्वेषां पापानां सत्य अपनोदनार्थम् अस्माहं सहकुर्माणं क्षेमसद्धर्य वीर्य विजय आयुरारोग्य ऐश्वर्याणाम् अभिवृद्ध्यर्थं समस्ताङ्गलाभ्यर्थं समस्तदुर्दोषाभ्यर्थं रमणमहर्षेः प्रसादेन ज्ञानवैराग्यसिद्ध्यर्थं श्रीरमणमहर्षेः पूजां करिष्ये। तदंगम कल स पूजाम स करिष्ये। विघ्नेश्वरम यथास्थानं प्रतिष्ठापयामि शोभनार्थे क्षेमाय पुनरागमनाय च। कलशस्य मुखे विष्णुकंठे रुद्रसमाधिस्थ मूले सत्रसद्यो ब्रह्मा मातृगणे समृद्धा कुशौ तुषाकरा सर्वे सप्तसुधा सुंदरा ऋग्वेदो यजुर्वेदो सामवेदोपधर्मण गंगे सतैर्न गोदावरी सरस्वती नर्मदे सिंधु कावेरी जलेस्मिन् सन्निधं कुरु अंगै सहिता सर्वे कलशामृतवादिस्था आयान्त दैवपूजातं दुर्दशकारगा। तंबूरा सागरोत्पन्नो विष्णु विष्णु करे देवज मुझे दे पांचने नमोस्तु दे देवो देवालय प्रोक्त जीव देवस्नानन अंजान निर्मालयम सोया मौने पूजयेत ओम सकल गुणात्म शक्तियुक्ता योग पीडात्मने नमः आधार शक्तिये नमः मूल प्रकृतिये नमः आदिवराय नमः आदिगुरुमाय नमः आनंदाय नमः पृथ्व्यै नमः आदित्यादि नवग्रह देवोभ्यो नमः दशदिग्बालेभ्यो नमः गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णु गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरु साक्षात् परब्रह्म तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः। ओम अस्येति प्राणप्रतिष्ठामन्त्रस्य ब्रह्मा विष्णु महेश्वर ऋषिरगजित सामधर्माणि संतांसि सकल जगत स्थितिरति संहारकारिणी प्राणशक्ति परादेवता आम बीजम हरिं शक्ति लोम कीलकम प्राणप्रतिष्ठापने विनियोग आम अंगुष्ठाभ्यां नमः हरिं गर्जिनीभ्यां नमः लोम मध्यमाभ्यां नमः आम अनाभ्याभ्यां नमः हरिं कनिष्ठिकाभ्यां नमः लोम कर्णकुष्ठाभ्यां नमः आम हृदयाय नमः हरिं से स्वाहा रोम शिगाय वसट आम कौसायम हरिं नेत्रकाय वसट रोम अस्त्रकाय पट पूर्व स्वर्ग दिग्बंध ध्यानम रग्गांबोधिस्थ बोधोलस तरुण तोड़कराप्ते पासम गोदंड मिक्षुत मणिगुण बंदमाना प्राणश कपालम तननदाय तीनों तोरटिया देवी वाला रोना बहु सुग्री प्राण शक्ति परान ओम आम हरिं रोम हरिं माम अम यम रम लम वंशम सम्म अंश सोहम सोहम अंश अस्यामूर्तौ दीवदृष्टुदु अस्यामूर्तौ सर्वेन्द्रियाणि वाङ्मनस्व सस्यश्रोत्र जीव्या प्राणवा पाणिपाद पायुपुष्टानि या कस्ति स्वस्ति सुखं सुरं दृष्टन्तु स्वाहा। ओम अस्य श्री प्राणदृष्टामन्दस्य ब्रह्मा विष्णु महेश्वर ऋषिरगजितामधर्माणि संतांसि सकल जगत स्थितिदलि संहारकारिणी प्राणशक्ति परादेवता आम बीजम हरिं शक्ति लोम कीलकम प्राणप्रतिष्ठापने विनियोग आम अंगुष्ठाभ्यां नमः हरिदर्जनेभ्यां नमः रोम मध्यमाभ्यां नमः आम अनाभ्याभ्यां नमः रोम कर्णकुष्ठाभ्यां नमः आम हृदयाय नमः हरिं से स्वाहा रोम शिगाय वसट आम कौसायम हरिं नेत्रकाय वसट रोम अस्त्रकाय पट पूर्व स्वर्ग दिग्बंध असुनीदे पुनरस्माक्ष सक्ष प्राणमीनो इदे भोगम जो पश्य में सूर्य मचंदन मनमने मृयान सुक्ति आवाहिदो भव सद्दाविदो भव सन्निहितो भव सन्निहितो भव अवगुंडितो भव सुब्रतो भव सुब्रसन्नो भव सुमुखो भव वरदो भव प्रसिद्ध प्रसिद्ध स्वामिन् सर्वजगन्नाथ यावत् पूजावसारकं तावत् ध्रुवं प्रतिभावेन बिम्बेऽस्मिन् सन्निधं गुरु। ओम भूर्भुवस्वः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो न प्रचोदयात् देवदत्त प्रसोदत्यं दर्शन प्रसज्जामि अमृतत्वं स्वाहा ओम प्राणाय स्वाहा ओम अपाराय स्वाहा ओम ज्ञानाय स्वाहा ओम उदाराय स्वाहा ओम समानाय स्वाहा ओम ब्रह्मणे स्वाहा ओम नमो भगवते श्री अरुणाचल रमणाय नमः नमो भगवते श्री अरुणाचल रमणाय नमः नमो भगवते श्री अरुणाचल रमणाय नमः। ओम नमः शिवाय नमः ओम नमः शिवाय नमः ओम नमः शिवाय नमः ओम शिवाय नमः ओम शिवाय नमः ओम शिवाय नमः। नाट्यचक्र नैवेद्यं समर्पयामि मध्ये मध्ये पानीयं समर्पयामि अमृतोत्तरावोसं समर्पयामि नीराजनं समर्पयामि नीराजनानन्तरम् आस्मनीयं समर्पयामि। recite Bhagwan's Ramana Stotram. All of you can recite along with me. श्री गुरुभ्यो नमः। गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णु गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरा गुरु साक्षात् परब्रह्म तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः। अपार शक्ति सुकुमारी राशौर्य चोर्मी मात्रम दूरम समस्तम गुरायुधम तम रमणम कबीरम चिंताविनीनम कीर्तिचिन्तयामि। ओम महासे नमः ओम सेन जाताय नमः ओम श्री रमणाय नमः ओम गुरवे नमः ओम अखंड संविदागराय नमः ओम मौजसे नमः ओम कारणोद्भवाय नमः ओम जगत इदावताराय नमः ओम श्री भूमिनाथास्तलोतिदाय नमः ओम पराशर कुलोतंसाय नमः ओम सुंदरातदवत्पलाय नमः ओम कवनीय सुचारित्राय नमः ओम सयायाम्बा सयायवते नमः ओम चौड़ासुल महोलीर मानसाय नमः ओम स्वर्णस्तकाय नमः ओम श्रीमद्वादशांत महात्रैरक्त विद्योदयाय नमः ओम महाशक्ति निवादेन प्रभुत्वाय नमः ओम परमार्थ विदे नमः ओम दिव्यराय नमः ओम पितृविदान्वेषिणे नमः ओम हिंदुमौलिना पितृपदे नमः ओम पितुरादेस्त सोणशैलं प्राप्ताय नमः ओम तपोमयाय नमः ओम उदासीनाय नमः ओम महायोगिने नमः ओम महोत्साहाय नमः ओम कुशाग्रतीये नमः ओम शांत संकल्प संप्रभाय नमः ओम सुतुन्द्रुसे नमः ओम सवित्रे नमः ओम स्थिराय नमः ओम तपस्वीत सर्वंगाय नमः ओम बुल्लामूज विलोचनाय नमः ओम चंद्रिकासिदातत्री मंडितान मंडलाय नमः ओम सुदवाट्यां समासीनाय नमः ओम सूर्यदाखिल विप्रमाय नमः ओम वेद वेदांत तत्त्वज्ञाय नमः ओम तिन्मुत्रिणे नमः ओम त्रिगुणाधिगाय नमः ओम विरूपाक्ष गुहावासाय नमः ओम विराजत सदाकृतिये नमः ओम उत्तिप्तनयनाय नमः ओम पूर्णाय नमः ओम रसिदासुर तांडवाय नमः ओम गंभीराय नमः ओम परमाचार्याय नमः ओम सुप्रसन्याय नमः ओम अभयप्रदाय नमः ओम दक्षिणासीनिवाय नमः ओम धीराय नमः ओम दक्षिणाभिमुखाय नमः ओम स्वराजे नमः ओम महर्षिये नमः ओम भगवते नमः ओम ईत्याय नमः ओम भूमविद्या विशारदाय नमः ओम विमलाय नमः ओम दीर्घदर्शने नमः ओम आप्ताय नमः ओम ऋजमार्ग प्रदर्शकाय नमः ओम समत्रुसे नमः ओम सत्यत्रुसे नमः ओम सत्याय नमः ओम प्रशांताय नमः ओम अमित विक्रमाय नमः ओम सुकुमाराय नमः ओम सदानंदाय नमः ओम मृदुभाषिणे नमः ओम दयार्णवाय नमः ओम श्री सोनासुर युरुद्भूत स्कंदाश्रम निकेतनाय नमः ओम सद्दर्शनोपदेशने नमः ओम सद्भक्त वृंद परिप्लुताय नमः ओम गणेश मुनिप्रिय सेविता मृतरोरुवाय नमः ओम गीतोपदेश सारादि ग्रंथ संसिन्न संख्याय नमः ओम वर्णाश्रम मदादीदाय नमः ओम रसज्ञाय नमः ओम सर्वज्ञाय नमः ओम आत्मवदे नमः ओम सर्वावनि मस्ताना महाराध्याय नमः ओम सर्वसद्गुणिने नमः ओम आत्मारामाय नमः ओम महाभागाय नमः ओम मातृमुक्ति विधायकाय नमः ओम विनदाय नमः ओम विनुदाय नमः ओम विप्राय नमः ओम मुनीन्द्राय नमः ओम भावगोज्वलाय नमः ओम दर्शनाथक सम्मारणे नमः ओम मौनेन स्वात्मबोधकाय नमः ओम निर्चान्दिकरसानित्याय नमः ओम प्रणात्मोचकाय नमः ओम अन्तस्मिन चण्डांसवे नमः ओम संसारारम्भतारकाय नमः ओम सोणादिष्टरे नमः ओम आर्तविद्या प्रकाशकाय नमः ओम अविच्युतनीय प्रज्ञाय नमः ओम नैसर्गिक महातपसे नमः ओम कमंडलुधराय नमः ओम सुप्रगवीनवसनाय नमः ओम गुहाय नमः ओम दंडवाणीये नमः ओम कृपापूर्णाय नमः ओम पवरोग पिशक्पराय नमः ओम स्कंदाय नमः ओम देवदमाय नमः ओम अमर्तयाय नमः ओम सेनानिये नमः ओम पुरुषोत्तमाय नमः ओम नमो भगवते श्री अरुणाचल श्री रमणाय नमः ओम नमो भगवते श्री अरुणाचल श्री रमणाय नमः ओम नमो भगवते श्री अरुणाचल श्री रमणाय नमः कार्तिकेयाय नमः मुरुगाय नमः वल्ली देवाने नमः सुब्रह्मण्याय नमः स्वामिनाथाय नमः दक्षिणामूर्तिये नमः नटराजा भैरवानंद महेश्वराय शिव पार्वतीये नमः Om Namah Shivaya Namah. Om Namah Shivaya Namah. Om Namah Shivaya Namah. Om Shivaya Namah. Om Shivaya Namah. Om Shivaya Namah. Oh, let us all recite Upadesa Saram. कर्तुराज्ञया प्रापदे फलं कर्मगिम्बरं कर्मदज्जडं कृतिमहदतो पदनकारणं फलमशाश्वतं गदनिरोधकम् ईश्वरार्पितं नेचया कृतं सिद्धसोदकं मुक्तिसाधकम् कायवाङ्मन कार्यमुत्तमं भोजनं जप चिन्तनं क्रमात् जगतैषधी युक्तसेवनम् अष्टमूर्तिभिः देवपूजनम् उत्तमस्तवा उज्जमन्दद सिद्धजं जप ज्ञानमुत्तमम् आद्यधारया शोधसासमं सरलचिन्तनं विरलदबरं वेदभावना सौवमित्यतो भावनाविदा भावनीमदा भावशून्यस भावसुस्तुति भावनाबला भक्तिरुद्धमा इरुस्तरे मन स्वस्थता क्रिया भक्ति योगो गाकनिश्चितं वायुरोदना दीयते मन जालभक्षिव रोधसाधनं सिद्धवायव सिद्क्रियायुधा सागयोर्द्वयी शक्तिमूलगा लय विनाशने उभयरोदने लयकदम्बुन भवति नो मृदं प्राणबन्धना लीनमानसम् एकचिन्तना नासमेत्यद नष्टमानसो दृष्टयोगिन कृत्यमस्ति किं स्वस्तिदं यद दृश्यवारिदं सिद्धमात्मन चित्वदर्शनं तत्वदर्शनं मानसं दुहिं मार्गणे हृदे नैव मानसं मार्गार्गवात् वृद्धयस्त्वहं वृत्तिमाश्रिता वृद्धयो मनो नित्यहं मन अहमयं कुतो भवति चिनवद ऐपदत्यहं निजविचारणम् अहमिनासवा अहमहं दया स्फुरधिरस्वयं परमपूर्णस इदमहं वदा अभिज्ञमन्वहम् अहमिनीनके तल्यसत्तया विक्रयेन्द्रिय प्राणदीदम नामसे कद गज्जडं भज सत्वभासिका चित्ववेदरा सत्तया इति सिद्धयायहम् ईशजीवयो वेशदीदिदा सस्वभावदो वस्तु केवलं देशानद स्वात्मदर्शनम् ईशदर्शनम् स्वात्मरूपत आत्मसंस्थिति स्वात्मदर्शनम् आत्मनिर्दया आत्मनिष्ठता ज्ञानवर्धिता अज्ञानहीनचित् ज्ञानमस्ति किं ज्ञातुमन्तरं किं स्वरूपमे इत्यात्मदर्शने अव्ययभवा पूर्णसित्सुखं बन्धमुक्त्यदिं तम्बरं सुखं विन्दधीयये वस्तुदैविक अहमवेदगं निजविभानगं महति तं तवो रमणवागियं महति तं तवो रमणवागियं महति तं तवो रमणवागियम्। ओम नमो भगवते श्री अरुणाचल रमणाय नमः। ओम नमो भगवते श्री अरुणाचल श्री रमणाय नमः। ओम नमो भगवते श्री अरुणाचल श्री रमणाय नमः।
Namo Ramana. A very warm welcome to all the devotees for Ramana Kendra Delhi's Sunday Satsang with Raghavji. Raghavji shall be speaking to us as he does every month on the earliest set of instructions given by Bhagavan in his own handwriting, condensed in the form of Vichara Sangraha. This consists of a series of questions posed by the devotee between 1900 and 1902 and handwritten answers by Bhagavan. The topics include both the core practice of self-inquiry as well as practices supportive or helpful for self-inquiry. Our speaker, as always, is Sri Raghav Kumarji, a long-time devotee of Bhagavan. He has a deep background of Vedanta study under various acharyas of Rishikesh and Uttarkashi. And after completing a degree in technology in 1993 and a few years of research in electronics, he was drawn to the exclusive pursuit of the path of self-inquiry. He was blessed to be closely associated with the Ramakrishna mission, Harshavidya tradition, and the Adi Shankara Brahma Vidyapith. Since 2001, he divides his time between Uttarkashi and Ramanashram in Tiruvannamalai. He occasionally shares what he has learned from the acharyas with fellow devotees. I shall now request Raghavji to address us. Over to you, sir.
Hari Om. Om Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murtibheda Vibhagine Vyomavadvyapta Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha. Vande Shri Ramanarsheh Acharyasya Padabjam Yo me Darshayadisham Bhantam Dhvantamaditya. Welcome to another session of study of the words of Bhagavan given in the Vichara Sangraham or self-inquiry. As you know, we have these 40-odd questions in this particular work, and we were studying the 18th question. The 18th question has something very interesting. Bhagavan has actually sketched a diagram in which Bhagavan illustrates how the Atman is the source of everything. And then he has weaved together in that single diagram all the three states of experience and also the three bodies, what are known as the gross, subtle, and causal bodies. So as we can see, while Bhagavan keeps the practice very simple and very accessible, there is also a great deal of depth and completeness in what he is talking about, in that he addresses many of these traditional prakriyas or teaching methods and incorporates them into the teaching of self-inquiry. So that is an important point. We have to note how the tradition of Adi Shankara commenting on the Upanishads and having these elaborate discussions has been very beautifully and helpfully given to us as Bhagavan's Upadesha. And we are getting that same depth and authenticity, while at the same time avoiding too much of argumentation and polemics. Polemics means there is a certain back and forth between, say, opponents who do not agree with Vedanta and so on. That is very important in certain contexts. But for us as sadhakas, we only need to look at some of the basic yuktis or reasonings, and we perhaps might not feel so committed to getting into the polemics. So Bhagavan helpfully summarizes and gives us that essence of Vedanta. And in this question particularly, he is able to weave together this entire prakriya or teaching methodology of the three states and the three bodies. So we kind of introduced that in the last session. I will read the question and we will continue our study. The disciple asks, how do the three states of experience, the three bodies, etc., which are imaginations, appear in the self-light, which is one impartite and self-luminous? Even if they should appear, how is one to know that the self alone remains ever unmoving? And the master gives the example of a diagram. So I can just show it to you here with a few footnotes which I have written. But next time, perhaps I will give you the figure on the screen itself. So Bhagavan points out that in the innermost experience of every being in deep sleep is just the self which is there with the causal body. So whenever you hear the word causal body, it's something seemingly very abstract and difficult to relate to. All you have to think of is your own experience in deep sleep. That is when the causal body alone is available for experience. So Bhagavan says that in deep sleep, the causal body or avidya alone is present. That is what clouds our perception by making us not see the diversity, not see all these different objects that I see in the waking state. And at the same time, I never say I didn't exist. I never say that I don't remember anything at all about what was there yesterday or the day before and so on, implying the continuity of my existence. In fact, if there's any one statement in this universe which can be called an absolute truth, it is the very fact of being or existence. That I exist is a non-contradictable statement. And deep sleep is a testimony to that, where this entire Jagat or world of objects is not present, and yet I exist. No doubt we will say there was a blank, it was not very clear what was there. That is quite correct, because the mind is not active there. It is the mind which you can say actually sleeps. I am the witness who am there in all the three states of experience. So Bhagavan points out how in the deep sleep, just the self or Atman or I is there with the causal body. The causal body means I don't know anything and I am at ease. So that's the second part which is important to note. Deep sleep is a standing testimony to the fact that happiness is my true nature. I don't really need even a very magical experience of samadhi to really become convinced that sukha is my own swarupa. Because in deep sleep, without any objects, without any relationships, without any friends or anything that I call mine, without even the body, I am still at ease. We all look forward to the experience of deep sleep. There is not a single human being who says, I don't want the deep sleep experience. I don't want that. Nobody will say that, because it is so relaxing when all the outer preoccupations are set aside and we come back to rest in one's own being. No doubt, there is a certain clouding, a certain tamas, a certain blankness, which makes us not recognize that that is the self. So deep sleep, therefore, is not really Atma Jnanam. But the Atman alone is present there in deep sleep, a point worth reiterating. There are people sometimes who say, how do we know that, my nature is of the nature of Ananda as it is claimed in Vedanta or by the teachers? Maybe my nature is to be in sorrow also. Maybe it's a mix of both. And they also give an example. Suppose somebody says, I like to be in, some grief. I like to be in some negative state. I think I like it. Just to argue, they might say that. You only have to ask them to pursue that line of thought a little further. So you say you like to be in grief, or you like to be in negativity. There you go. That's what you like. So the fact that you like it implies you find some happiness in it. You find some satisfaction in it. So there is no getting away from the fact that happiness and satisfaction is what we are, what we seek, even if it manifests in a seemingly puzzling way outwardly. Then again, if someone says, unless I have all these objects around me, unless the situation around me is pleasant in a certain way in my perception, I won't be happy. If a person thinks like that, he only has to highlight in his mind the daily experience of letting go of everything and just resting as pure being. That itself is an example of a condition where the self is present, nothing else is present, there is ananda. So in the tradition we say, Sukham aham asvapsam nakinchidavedisham. I slept happily, I did not know anything. The two characteristics of the causal state or sushupti. And then Bhagavan points out that there is a certain doorway, as it were. The person wakes up in a mysterious way. That doorway to sleep is governed by karma. It's only because the person has a certain unworked out karma, he has to come and become active and fulfill the karmic accounts which he has, that he wakes up from deep sleep. Otherwise, deep sleep would hypothetically continue indefinitely. So only because of karma in operation with time or kala, the person wakes up from deep sleep. And then when that happens, the doorway of deep sleep opens. That light of Atman streams forth into a dream state. So this is Ardhavikasa Avastha. Ardhavikasa is half awake. So the person is not fully awake. At the same time, he is not in deep sleep. That is called the Swapnavastha or Ardhavikasa Avastha. So Bhagavan points out that as the second part of the human experience. And mediating this transition between the deep sleep state and the dream state is an entity which Bhagavan calls Mahat Tattva. So Mahat Tattva is the cosmic ego, to put it in one word. The reason why Bhagavan uses that word is to say that really there are no others. Ultimately, there is only one Mahat Tattva, or one entity which mediates the creation of this whole world from that causal state. So instead of taking the stand of there are many beings and each one has their karma and so on, Bhagavan here adopts what is known as Drishti Srishti Prakriya, where there is one causal body alone, which means you, the sleeper, are alone are. And then through the mediation of this Mahat Tattva, the cosmic ego, one entity which can be called the cosmic buddhi, not ego, cosmic buddhi, there's a projection of the entire world, of course, after the Swapnavastha. So this Mahat Tattva is a mysterious word Bhagavan uses. When you come across that word, just remember that it is what mediates the connection between one entity, Atman, and the projection into the world is starting to happen. That intermediate state or entity is called Mahat Tattva, the cosmic buddhi. And after the Mahat Tattva, there is an individuation. That is, the simple being is born. Even in the dream, if you note, you have a body. Each of us has a dream, but in the dream itself, you have another dream body with a dream mind. The dream body and mind may be a little different from the waking body and mind. So the Mahat Tattva is that which is even before the dream body and mind. And so that which projects that entire dream is what we call the Mahat Tattva. And this dream body is what can be called the Ahankara. The Ahankara is that individual being, possessed of his memories, possessed of his samskaras, all of that has come. The moment you say Ahankara, all the individual's own subjective timeline comes into play. whatever you have experienced in the past, all of that now has come into manifestation. It was there before in a seed form. Now it has come into manifestation. So remember the sequence. How are we going? Deep sleep is like the causal state, then mediated by this mysterious entity called Mahat Tattva, the cosmic Buddhi. There is an individuation, meaning a single simple being with a timeline. I was this in the past, I have to do this in the future. So that person has now come up, even in the dream, remember, not yet come to the waking state. So that is the second entity or second state, the sleep state. And traditionally, the sleep state too is very helpful, because that is the only living experience, or a direct experience rather, where we can see that all that exists, all the diverse three-dimensional world, there is a 3D world in dream which you project out of yourself. You know very well, there was no other entity. There were no dream mountains. There were no dream people. That entire 3D dream world was out of your own mind. What an amazing capacity of projection that mind has. And so it is to at least give a yukti or a reasoning, a possibility that, hey, look again, your waking world, just because it is a 3D world, just because you seem to have a body, there are other entities out there who seem to be very intelligent, possessed of their own free will and all that, doesn't mean all of that is absolutely real. So the fact that what you experience as apart from yourself, like in the waking state, that need not be real. So a very helpful experience everybody has is the dream, to tell us, just because I see something doesn't mean it is real. You know, conventionally we say, I experience something, therefore it is real. Well, not quite. That is a clause or a reasoning that is flawed. I see something, therefore it is mithya, as the acharyas say, in fact. But to come back to where we are, from deep sleep, the causal body, through the Mahat Tattva, the doorway of sleep opens. Due to karma, a person wakes up, his desires become active, and he has to start working them out. And then the second state of Swapna comes, where, like I said, out of that one awareness, one consciousness, a beautiful 3D world is projected. You're such a great artist. The forms that you can visualize are so vivid, so real. You're more of a great movie maker or a director than any regular film director or producer. So much capacity we have to project a movie for ourselves every night and dream. And after the dream state, further that very light of consciousness streams forward and wakes up, projecting this cosmic virat, or the gross body. We have a gross body, and there are other entities or jivas, there are other objects in this gross world. All of this, therefore, is, as it were, collapsed into deep sleep. So that is why deep sleep in the tradition of Bhagavan is the only deep sleep that exists. It's not as if when you sleep, we don't take the stand, the world continues. That's only a convenient way of thinking about it. But really, out of deep sleep, this entire world is projected, and into deep sleep it resolves. This entire world, consisting of all beings, including this body and mind, which you call I and mine, even that is also the projection. So that is the difference between what is known as subjective idealism. So we are not saying that I am imagining all this. No, even you are part of the imagination. You see the difference there? If someone says, I am imagining the existence of people around, objects around, okay, but you, meaning the body and mind, are also part of that imagination, like in a dream. Okay, like in a dream. It's not as if the dream body and mind which you have is real in the dream, and the dream body mind is projecting the rest of the dream. Not so. The dream body and mind are also part of the dream. That entire time-space continuum you have in the dream is part of the dream itself. Anyway, so in this sequence, therefore, one entity, the causal body, like a seed, becomes a small sprout. If you have ever sprouted these, mung beans, you can visualize the seed state, and then after sprouting, you have just a little sprout. that sprout is called the Mahatattva. And a little more, if it sprouts, it becomes the Ahankara. You can say in this case, the dream state. And still further, it becomes a sapling. Then you're starting to come into the waking state, a sapling and then a tree. That sapling slowly becomes the entire tree. So just as a small seed of a tree sprouts, becomes a sapling, and then becomes a tree, even so, these states of experience, which every day you're experiencing, are along that analogy. So Bhagavan therefore explains that the lamp inside is like the self, the doorway to sleep is there, which is governed by karma. Then the very door sill, the boundary between the deep sleep and dream, is the Mahatattva, the cosmic buddhi. And then there is the inner wall, which you experience in deep sleep. I don't see anything at all, pure, like a blank state. That inner wall is the veiling of what I am. What I am is veiled from me. That is why it is called avidya. If in deep sleep that veil of avidya were also not present, it would become brahmajnanam alone. There would be no other obstruction to jnanam. But that avidya is present even in the deep sleep. That is what the acharyas are saying. There is a dispute there sometimes where one school of thought tries to say that the deep sleep is free of avidya. So we can say that is a one prakriya, as long as they do not contradict the rest of what Adi Shankara and his tradition says. We can say that is one way of looking at it. But here Bhagavan is accepting in deep sleep that nescience or avidya is present. And then the fourth step or the fifth step is the mirror. The mirror through which the light of Atma is projected outwards is the ahankara. So remember, even in the dream state itself, you have started having that ahankara. Why? Because you have some memories, you have some samskaras, all that is in the dream state, the ahankara comes. The sixth entity Bhagavan talks of are the windows through which, like windows in a house, the light streams forth. If there is a lamp kept inside a house, through the windows, that light of the lamp streams outwards. So like that, Bhagavan says, your sense organs are the doorways through which the light of the self streams out. And that creates the waking state. That is called the number 9, Bhagavan calls it the outer court. Outer court means there's a house, then outside there's a outer court. That part is the waking state. Before that, you have the dream state, the middle chamber, which Bhagavan labels number 8. Then number 7, the inner chamber, is deep sleep. In this way, like even you have a house, inside there is a lamp, then there is a door sill, the halfway point, which is neither inside the house nor outside the house, the veranda, if you like. That is the Mahatattva. Then just as you get onto the veranda, it is dream. And then the rest of the world outside the house is called the waking state. So in this way, the light from within streams outwards. That is the sum of this entire discussion. We will read what Bhagavan says, summing up this. The self, which is the lamp, shines of its own accord in the inner chamber, the causal body, that is endowed with nescience as the inner wall and sleep as the door. When by the prana, which is conditioned by time or kala and karma, the door of sleep is opened, there occurs a reflection of the self in the egoity mirror. So the self gets reflected in the ahankara, which is placed next to the doorstep. The doorstep is the Mahatattva. The egoity mirror thus illuminates the dream state. And through the windows, which are the 5 jnanendriyas or the cognitive sense organs, the waking state, the outer court happens. When again, by the vital principle as conditioned by kala and karma, the sleep door gets shut. The egoity ceases along with waking and dream, and the self alone shines. The example given explains how the self is unmoving, how there is a difference between the self and the ahankara, and how the 3 states of experience and the 3 bodies appear. So Bhagavan says in this diagram, the self is shown to be ever shining, never absent, ever unmoving. Its nature as of the nature of light, of the nature of peace, of the nature of love. All of that is always the truth. No matter what happens outwardly, no matter what happens in the external world, that truth never changes. If anything, it's a relief to learn that no matter how tough things get in the external world, that truth about yourself is ever the same Ananda. And we have the capacity to set aside, like I said, these roles, these additions to the self. Even for some time of the day, if we are able to do that, Bhagavan is going to take 2 steps towards us. So all of this, remember, need not be just an abstract theory. It is to gain that conviction that I have the capacity to come back to just being myself, set aside my worries, if you like, my roles, if you like. All of that I can temporarily at least set aside, come back to being very strongly grounded in the present moment. The more I do that, the more I can do those roles in my life more appropriately, more correctly. Otherwise, I'm caught up with the role. I do not have my feet on the ground. That we shouldn't nurture or increase that tendency. Have one's feet firmly planted in the ground, meaning we have the capacity to just come back every day to ourselves, operate from that innermost core of oneself. Then, of course, we reach out, and every day is a challenge. Every day has so much of variety. There is a certain karma unfolding. We prayerfully let it unfold. All of that is, of course, possible by keeping sight of this teaching of Bhagavan. Then the disciple goes on to ask, although I have listened to the explanation of the characteristics of inquiry in such great detail, my mind has not gained even a little peace. What is the reason for this? So, as is quite understandable, the disciple asks, well, understanding this at a kind of information level doesn't really seem to help. And Bhagavan says the reason is the absence of strength or ekagrata. Chitta ekagrata is the word Bhagavan uses. That absence of one-pointedness of mind is why you are not able to immediately grasp the truth that the self or I is already free of all distress, already free of all the dross and the gross which is there. That is because of absence of chitta ekagrata, Bhagavan says. And then the disciple goes on to ask, so what is the reason for that absence of mental strength? And then Bhagavan goes on to explain some of the auxiliary practices which are helpful for self-inquiry, but which are not exactly the core practice, but they're very helpful. So Bhagavan says, the means that make one qualified for inquiry are dhyana and yoga and so on. One should gain proficiency in these through graded practice and thus secure a stream of mental modes that is natural and helpful, which is called sajatiya vritti pravaha. Sajatiya vritti pravaha is what Bhagavan says first we should develop. If you look at how the monkey mind, as it's often called, behaves, just imagine walking across a road. The moment you see someone walking past, let's say with some ethnicity or with wearing a particular dress, your mind takes off on that. You know, this ethnicity, let's say the Chinese or something, oh, they have this problem and they create problems and so on. So the mind goes on building on some immediate response or input from the environment. I'm walking past, I see a Rolls Royce going by. I imagine, oh, this is a very costly limousine. And then I think, oh, the sheikhs in the Arab countries are so rich. Oh, and I don't have so much money. So somewhere the connections are developed where from apparently irrelevant or unassociated things and objects, my mind develops a certain thinking pattern, associative thinking as it's called, and then comes back to itself and says, oh, I don't have this, I don't have that, or I'm not okay. So this kind of constant jumping around, which the mind does, ending not in a very good way. If the mind just jumps around, frolics around, it's okay. But then it generally ends up or tries to get into these vortices of emotion. So a certain repetitive thinking pattern which is draining. That is the tendency of the mind. And Bhagavan is trying to say one needs to first address that. If I have a tendency to get into this vortices of negative self-talk and thinking, that is not a proper conducive vritti pravaha. So Bhagavan uses the word a stream of mental modes. So that vritti pravaha should be helpful, not unhelpful. So getting stressed out and worrying by going on dwelling on the past or thinking about the future in various alarming ways, or looking at the environment and getting reminded of what I don't have, or feeling small in some way. All of that is unhelpful vritti pravaha. That has to be first wound back, come to a positive, constructive vritti pravaha. That is where Bhagavan goes on to say that when the mind that has in this manner become ripe with the proper vritti pravaha, and it listens even, see how nicely Bhagavan says, if that ripe mind listens to the present inquiry, it will at once realize its true nature, which is the self, and remain in perfect peace without deviating from that state. So this is an assurance that if we are in this right and a calm frame of mind, the very words of the Guru are Shravanam. The words of the Guru themselves convey the knowledge. It's not as if you have to do something later. For sure, that is required because the mind is not fully ripe. But then, to the extent that the mind is ripe, even the very Shravanam gives rise to removal of avidya, or at least lightening of that avidya to start with. So that is what Bhagavan is highlighting here, that when the mind which is ripe listens, the original word Bhagavan uses in Tamil is Shravanam, and that he does the Shravanam of the present way of inquiring, it will at once realize its true nature, which is the self. So one doesn't need anything more than the Guru's words. That is the reality. And it will remain in perfect peace without deviating from that state. To a mind which has not become ripe, immediate realization and peace are hard to gain through listening to inquiry. So that is also something Bhagavan is accepting, that if the mind is not yet fully ripe, then that peace will be not easy by just doing the Shravanam. One has to follow it up by what is traditionally known as Mananam and Nididhyasanam, which Bhagavan calls Atma Vichara. So that Vichara also is a continued practice which is required. But otherwise, just staying with the words of Bhagavan, continuously dwelling on that is sufficient for Jnanam, says Bhagavan. Yet, if one practices the means for mind control for some time, peace of mind can be obtained eventually. So he is encouraging us, saying that practice the initial, auxiliary practices, and for sure the mind will come into control. And the next question the disciple asks, of the means for mind control, which is the most important? And Bhagavan answers, breath control or pranayama is the means for mind control. And breath control is the word in English which is mentioned here. The disciple asks, how is breath to be controlled? And Master answers, breath can be controlled either by absolute retention of breath, kevala kumbhaka, or by regulation of breath or pranayama. So the word pranayama is more related to regulation of breath. What is regulation of breath? So I choose to breathe in various specific ways. I kind of control what is happening to my exhale, elongating it, and holding for a while and inhaling in the regular, what is known as anuloma viloma, the most harmless of the pranayamas. A small, detour we will take here. So nowadays, many methods are popular which overemphasize the hyperventilation, which is fast breathing and lot of inhale, less exhale, especially. That is very unhelpful, and it is not to be done without proper supervision. And in general, those who are encouraging these methods do not know how to handle the fallout. Because what happens if a person increases the breathing rate unreasonably, very fast breathing, and taking a long inhale and then just pumping out like Bastrika. If that is done for more than a few minutes even, it unnecessarily rakes up the unconscious part of the mind, the anxious part of the mind. A kind of catharsis tries to happen, but it doesn't happen. It needlessly is muddying the waters of the mind. So I would suggest strong caution for all Bhagavan devotees that those are not the methods Bhagavan is at all recommending when it comes to pranayama and kevala kumbhaka. These are very gentle, harmless methods. You can pursue it as long as you wish without any side effects. Whereas the hyperventilation methods, more than even a couple of minutes, it will have some fallout in the form of some negatives, fallout will be there. So that's definitely not encouraged by Bhagavan here. And what is absolute retention of breath or kevala kumbhaka? Bhagavan answers, it is making the vital air stay firmly in the heart. The prana, vital air means prana, making the vital air stay firmly in the heart, even without exhalation and inhalation. This is achieved through meditation on the prana, etc. So here we are not directly controlling the prana. Instead, we work on the mind, quieten the mind, and focus on some particular center or on a mantra, in whichever way the breath comes to a total halt using the mind. So that is kevala kumbhaka, not by just holding the breath forcibly. And then what is the other method? What is regulation of breath or pranayama? So Bhagavan says, it is making the vital air stay firmly in the heart through exhalation, inhalation, and retention according to the instructions given in the yoga texts. So here there is movement of air or prana, inhalation, exhalation, and retention, all are there as given in the yoga text, which is predominantly the Patanjali Yoga Sutras. So Bhagavan is validating the Patanjali Yoga Sutras here. And it is noteworthy that even in the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, no fast breathing of any kind is mentioned. Prachardhana vidharanabhyam va pranasya, one of the definitions, where it is gentle retention and exhalation, not excess inhalation and fast inhalation and so on. None of that is mentioned anywhere in the Patanjali Yoga Sutras. So great caution is required in these hyperventilation methods, because like I said, it will have a counterproductive effect on the mind. It rakes up like a catharsis. A person might feel some cathartic feeling. It's temporary. He will feel more depressed after these methods. That is the experience of many people. I have myself seen that happen, that unregulated hyperventilation. It ends up with the person worse off than where he started. On the other hand, positively speaking, the gentle anuloma viloma, slow inhalation for a few seconds and slow exhalation for a few seconds. If you want, time it to a mantra, excellent. That's very harmless. You can do it as long as you wish. If you want a particular tip there, just chant any mantra you like Om Namah Shivaya. Or if you are chanting Bhagavan's mantra, take one inhalation of Bhagavan's mantra, Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya, a gentle speed, not very fast. Then retain Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya. Then exhale Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya. Sufficient, just repeat. Inhale, retain, exhale. You don't even have to alternate nostrils. Just the very fact of regulating the inhale exhale will work. And like I said, the reason is because there is a direct connection between the number of breaths per minute which you take and the parasympathetic nervous system, which quietens the mind, which quietens the emotions, makes you more peaceful. So 15 minutes of this breathing with a mantra, be it, it is like they say, Sone pe suhaga. So you can get the benefit of regulation of prana as well as you are doing the mantra repetition. So you do both. In the tradition, when they do the Gayatri Pranayama, they chant Gayatri mantra along with the pranayama. So today you can very well do the Bhagavan mantra, or if you are doing some other mantra, fine, go ahead. That same mantra for about 3 to 4 seconds of inhalation, chant the mantra, hold if possible for 3 to 4 seconds. If you cannot do the hold, you can skip the hold, exhale for that 3 to 4 seconds, time to the same mantra. That would be like very easy to do. Inhale, not much of a hold, and exhale. And if you're able to do the hold, even better. Just a couple of seconds, 3 seconds hold is sufficient, not a long hold. So 3 to 4 seconds of inhalation, 3 to 4 seconds of retention, 3 to 4 seconds of exhalation. Alternatively, if you're not comfortable with the hold, then 3 to 4 seconds inhale, Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya. Exhale, Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya. So it works like magic. Just do that for 15 minutes. For sure, you don't need any reasoning to convince you. It will give benefit. So that is the method Bhagavan here says as regulation of breath or pranayama, making the vital air stay firmly in the heart. So the why it's called heart is because the mind, which is always going all over the place, starts coming back and rests in the heart as pure being. So the heart here, you are at one level. You can refer to it as the physical region in the chest, the central part of the chest. But going deeper, it is that from which the mind arises itself. So the word heart has that deeper meaning, Hridhi Ayam, in which all this exists. And so this word heart here implies that through regulation of breath, the mind stops its oscillations and rests in its source, the heart. So it is given in the yoga text. So Bhagavan, you can see how totally he is validating the Patanjali Yoga Sutras. Doesn't try to look down on them or say it's all lower and so on. There's nothing lower and higher. If it works for you, that's higher for you. If any method works for you, it's higher for you. Only caveat is it shouldn't be part of some cult or part of some indoctrination. Then for sure you have to take the good part in that practice, but stay away from any kind of exclusivist ideas or cultish ideas. So without the cultish ideas, any practice that you come across, it is in line with Bhagavan's teaching here. How is breath control the means for mind control? So he's now asking for a little more elaboration, the disciple, that how the pranayama helps in controlling the mind. So remember the well-known statement from the Upadesha Saram, where we say Chittavayavas Chitriyayuta Shakhayor Shakti Mulaka. So these are two branches of the tree. The prana and manas are like two branches of the tree. If you pull one branch, the other also comes towards you. So like often it is said, if the tree has some fruits at a higher branch, which is the mind branch, you can pull the lower branch, the prana branch, the breath branch, and then the higher branch also will bend and come towards you, at least to some extent. And then you can pluck the fruits from the higher branch. So again, that analogy, you can stretch it a little more beyond a point. You cannot just pull the lower branch as much as you want. You will need to work on the mind as well. So which is why exclusively relying on pranayama to control the mind doesn't work. It doesn't go all the way. But to some extent, for sure, pranayama is a stepping stone to controlling the mind. But in tandem, one should also examine the mind. One should also practice Atma Vichara. That's the best way to go ahead. So then Bhagavan answers, there is no doubt that breath control is the means for mind control, because the mind, like breath, is part of air, because the nature of mobility is common to both. So there is an element of Vayu even in the mind, which is what makes the mind always jumping around, going around. So mind also has a component of Vayu in it. That's what Bhagavan says, because the nature of mobility is common to both, because the place of origin is again the same for both. Both are originating from that same self. And because when one of them is controlled, the other gets controlled. So Bhagavan says three things. Okay, why prana and manas are both so mutually complementary in one controlling the other? Because both are of the nature of mobility. They have the characteristic of mobility, chanchalatva, movement. Second, both have the same origin. Both are coming from that same consciousness awareness. And thirdly, if you move other, the other also moves. If there is no movement at all in the breath, the mind also naturally comes to a still. So that is why both are to be mutually used. Their mutual correlation is useful for you. And breath control becomes the means for mind control, because mind is more difficult to control. So you start with breath, but in tandem work on the mind as well. Next question, the 26th one we will see. Since breath control leads only to poisons of the mind and not to its destruction, how can it be said that breath control is the means for inquiry which aims at the destruction of mind? So this disciple here, Gambhiram Seshaya, says that, but won't breath control just temporarily still the mind? Manolaya will happen. Will it really address the deeper ajnana, avidya, which is called manonasha? So remember, whenever you hear the word manonasha, it's not the physical destruction of something very real. It only means that the avidya, which makes the mind, makes you think you're separate and other things are separate, where the self is not known, that avidya is destroyed. So manonasha is identically equal to avidya nasha. If avidya is destroyed, mind is destroyed. And correspondingly, whenever there is any word used called manonasha, it is implied that it is avidya nasha. What happens after avidya is destroyed? Will the mind not work at all? We say that there is as though a functioning of the mind. As though functioning happens. So we don't say that, it just, the mind vanishes in a plume of smoke, puff, like that, it doesn't go away. Otherwise, we will not have the blessings of the jnanis. We will not have the fortune of conversing with a jnani. If we agree that when there is a conversation, when there is a talking, when there is a breathing, the prana and manas are present, we have to accept that manonasha doesn't mean literal physical destruction of the mind. It means that the mind no longer binds the person. The mind no longer is driven by avidya. It is avidya nasha alone that is hinted at here. And why this use the word manonasha, the acharya says, because the destruction of avidya is so comprehensive and total that the mind's character entirely changes. What you and I experience as mind is laden with avidya alone. Its motivations, its desires, its movements are all laden with a certain avidya. No doubt, we may be better off than where we were earlier, so 10 years back, maybe. But still, the avidya component is there. If we look carefully, there is some element of veiling. On the other hand, the jnani's mind, therefore, we cannot directly form a concept out of it. We can only make a certain general inference and say, yes, the jnani is as though talking, as though he is eating, as though he is breathing. And so manonasha there, for sure, we can say that the mind as it exists for me is not there for him because avidya is gone. We can only make an inference there and say, as though something is happening, the jnani, the upadhi, the body, mind are continuing to bless the devotees. So, like I said, important takeaway, whenever you think of manonasha, it is avidya nasha. The manonasha doesn't have to mean the jnani will be like a statue, like a stone, or like an inanimate object. That's not necessary there. All the other movements which are happening, eating, sleeping, talking can happen. But still, it's a different mind, not the way my mind might function. That is the important thing, which is why the word manonasha is used, indicating it's not the way you or I experience the mind. Now, the disciple here is asking, once pranayama is done, will it not only lead to temporary subsidence or poisons of the mind, and not to its destruction? Isn't that so? So, how is breath control the means for inquiry, which is aiming for the destruction of the mind? And Bhagavan answers here. The scriptures teach the means for gaining self-realization in two modes. As the yoga with 8 limbs, Ashtanga Yoga, and as the yoga and as the knowledge with 8 limbs, Ashtanga Jnanam. by regulation of breath, pranayama, or by absolute retention thereof, kevala kumbhaka, which is one of the limbs of yoga, the mind gets controlled. Without leaving the mind at that, if one practices the further discipline, such as withdrawal of the mind from external objects, pratyahara, then at the end, self-realization, which is the fruit of inquiry, will surely be gained. So Bhagavan is assuring us that even if you follow pranayama, but then go on to the other limbs of Patanjali Yoga, for sure that same knowledge arises, leading to the manonasha or avidyanasha, as I just explained. And then the disciple goes on to ask, what are the limbs of yoga? So he was, as you know, animated by reading about the Yoga Sutras from Swami Vivekananda's books. So Swami Vivekananda, as you know, was the pioneering sage in modern times. He went to the West, and in order to have some structured, unfoldment of the Vedic texts and the Vedantic knowledge, he had written 4 different books dealing with different topics. Jnana Yoga, the topic of Jnana; Bhakti Yoga, topic of Bhakti; and Raja Yoga, the topic of Patanjali Yoga Sutras; and then Karma Yoga, or the topic of Karma. The word yoga, very often it just means topic. It doesn't have to mean a practice specifically of yoga. And in this context of Swami Vivekananda's books, it is helpful to even use the word topic for those words. I will maybe tell that later on why. But if you look at even the first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, some of you may know it's called Arjuna Vishada Yoga. The yoga of Arjuna's sorrow. That doesn't make much sense, does it? So the yoga, Arjuna is depressed, and that is yoga. Well, maybe he can convert into yoga, but it's not yoga by itself. Being depressed is not yoga just by being depressed. A person with a certain depression can, in a magical way, use that as a sadhana, but that's an entirely different topic. He can, with a certain self-awareness, if it is there, to that extent it is there, taking the help of whatever other modern tools of psychology, he can still convert even that, distressful situation into yoga, but that's a different topic. But in the case of Arjuna Vishada Yoga, however, we shouldn't think that the word yoga there is another specific practice, what Arjuna did there. No, it means the topic of Arjuna's sorrow. So the word yoga, remember, can mean topic or connecting thread between different things. So to come back to our discussion here, so Bhagavan says that, the questioner here asks questions about the Ashtanga Yoga because he had read Swami Vivekananda's very classic book on the Yoga Sutras, probably one of the earliest, written books on the Yoga Sutras, listing out some very insightful things about the mysteries of yoga and the mind. So for some of you who do not know, a brief explanation here is that Patanjali was a great Maharshi who is dated to have existed around 600 BC or so. Some people say 400 BC. But the early Buddhist texts also reference Patanjali, so which means that he was quite ancient, even by modern standards or modern, comparisons. So Patanjali Maharshi is supposed to have lived somewhere in the northwest of India, towards the Sindhu region, because he gives certain examples and geographical, references which are local to that region. And so this Maharshi composed or compiled the Yoga Sutras. And these Yoga Sutras primarily deal with how the mind is mastered, how prana is regulated. And incidentally, Patanjali mentions about avidya, about knowledge and so on. So the main topic is not self-knowledge there, but it is more to do with making the mind a very fit instrument. So when we, as students of Vedanta and students of Bhagavan Ramana, study the Yoga Sutras, we can very helpfully take much of it with the background context that it is helpful for mastering the mind or bringing the mind to a certain equipoise, bringing the mind to a certain ripeness, the ripeness that Bhagavan earlier talked of, which when it is present, the very words of Bhagavan are enough to give the glimpse of knowledge, to create that Brahmakara Vritti, or that knowledge of the self, what I am. So the word used by Bhagavan, if you remember, he says, Vichara Shravanam. Vichara Shravanam itself is enough. It's really not a method or a technique Bhagavan is teaching here. He's teaching the jnana itself. That's what he's trying to say here. That when the right mind listens to the present inquiry itself, he will get the knowledge. That is the emphasis in the traditional Vedanta too, about Shravanam itself gives the jnana. Of course, a certain ripeness is present. To the extent it is present, also it will give. It's not a go, no go. To the extent it is present, a certain clarity does come. More than just information, more than just conceptual knowledge. So that is the blessing of this Shravanam, or hearing the words of the Guru. And so the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali give us methods to control and master the mind, the modes of the mind, the vrittis of the mind, but they do not emphasize self-knowledge so much. That is an important point to note. It's mentioned there, avidya and so on, but not so much like how Bhagavan is teaching, for example. So what do we do as modern students? We take everything from that which is helpful for our practice, ripening the mind, antakkana shuddhi, or as it is called, purification of mind. And then the self-knowledge or self-inquiry directly gives us the knowledge of the self. So it is a stepping stone to self-knowledge. This two-stage process is often used everywhere. So remember this as the master plan. All practices are designed either to ripen the mind, to make the mind mature and ready, or they are directly instructions, they are directly unfoldment, or Shravanam, giving the knowledge of the self. And so these are the two broad practices of any guru or any teacher or teaching. Ripening the mind type of practices, directly pointing out the knowledge here and now. That is the the Upadesha or the Shravanam, what Bhagavan says. So these are the two broad practices. After the Shravanam, if a person is not yet fully ripe, he can then practice the Atma Vichara or Nididhyasanam. That is the subsequent follow-up. But broadly, these two are there. Ripening practices and the direct practices, direct instructions or direct Upadesha of what the self is. So Bhagavan assures us that by practicing the 8 steps of Patanjali, which he is going to teach us, the self-inquiry or the self-realization, which is a fruit of inquiry, will surely be gained. So you can see how there is this integrative approach in Bhagavan. Take everything in proper context and use that without compromising the core Advaitic unfoldment or the self-knowledge. And then Bhagavan goes on to list the Yoga Sutra, the practices, which maybe we will see it in the next class. So we will just read the next question and then stop here for today. Disciple asks, what are the limbs of yoga? The 27th question. Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, Samadhi. So 8 very popular words today. If most of you may know this, otherwise we will go with Bhagavan as he explains these 8 limbs of Patanjali, which were of great interest to the disciple in front of him. So, as I often say, that most of Bhagavan's questions and answers are ad hominem, meaning they are 100% meant for the disciple in front. And if you want to know what is meant for me, we need to have a comprehensive picture of what Bhagavan is saying. We can easily get sidetracked sometimes or get carried away by something Bhagavan says in one context. As many of you know, one very great disciple of Bhagavan, Ramana Brahmachari, was totally surrendered to Bhagavan. Bhagavan tells him he need not do the ancestral Pitrakarma, what is given as an offering to the departed fathers, departed ancestors. He need not do that. Now you have come here and you need not do that. He tells Ramanatha Brahmachari, who was struggling to do that with the meager resources and options available to him. He gives him that shoot, that, relaxation, if you like. And then hearing that, another disciple of Bhagavan also, refrains or skips doing the ancestral Pitrakarmas. And Bhagavan says, that's not meant for you. You should be doing it. It was meant for him. He has totally surrendered. In other words, what is meant for one person need not be 100% applicable for another. Very important to keep track of when we listen to Bhagavan's answers. So when we have the comprehensive picture of what Bhagavan is saying, we are safe. Otherwise, these are all in keeping with the disciples' questions in mind, Bhagavan answers. So with this, we will end today's talk and continue Bhagavan's own unfoldment of the Ashtangas of Patanjali in the next session. Hari Om. We'll end with the Shanti mantra. If there are any questions, you can ask. Otherwise, we will conclude today's session. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnam Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.
Namo Ramana Raghavji, thank you so much for your session. We do have 3 questions on the YouTube channel where we've got several devotees thanking you for the session as well. I can read out the questions to you now.
Yes.
Please advise if you would like to answer them now or in the subsequent session. The first question.
We can answer them one level today itself. And if it's a longer answer, I can continue that later. But I think we'll take it now.
Sure, sir. The first question is from Germana Di Paolo. She says, and I quote, "Dear Raghavji, do you think the Mahat Tattva is the reason why Bhagavan used to say there is only one ego?" Unquote.
Yes, I'll answer that. Absolutely correct. So Bhagavan is, as I said, unfolding the Drishti Srishti Prakriya, where we try to say, or not, we don't try to say, that's the reality actually, that there's only one conscious being in the universe. And that one conscious being alone, when he just starts manifesting the play of Maya through the Mahat Tattva or the cosmic ego or the cosmic Buddhi. The ego is one step further down the line, okay? So the word ego or egoity, let's use the word ahankara for that. But even before the ahankara has come, there is the Mahat Tattva. So the Mahat Tattva is a forerunner to what is known as ahankara. But even that ahankara, initially, it's just one. Then it starts streaming out and becoming many. Think of the dream world where, think of all that exists in the dream world. There are so many people and beings and so on. All of it is just one consciousness, right? That is closest to what can be called Mahat Tattva. So the ego, which has, not the ego, the cosmic Buddhi, which is just sprouted from the causal state, but has not yet become many fully. That is the Mahat Tattva. And then the Ahankara is when there's an individuation. There's a timeline. I did this yesterday. I'm going to do this tomorrow. That is the Ahankara. But even that, remember, in the dream state, how many individuals are really there? There's just one being who has projected the entire dream state. So as you correctly said, so Bhagavan doesn't try to say there are many Ahankaras. So one Ahankara gets the Jnana, the other Ahankaras continue. No, he doesn't say that. So as you correctly said, if the Jnana happens, that's it. There are no others. Bhagavan, such a profound statement he makes it elsewhere, saying that for the Jnani, there are no others. Because if there are many Ahankaras, then the others should be there, right? But they're not there. Just one alone is the Mahat Tattva, from which in Bhagavan's diagram, one Ahankara first emerges, like just the sapling, then the many come. So yes, your answer, you are correct. Yeah. Next, you can go with that understanding, Germana, you're right.
Thank you, sir. The second question is from Ajit Kumarji, and his question is, I quote, "Can we say Prana Vikshana is observation of birth?" Unquote.
Breath, I think he meant.
Breath, sorry, breath, yes.
Yes. Yes, Prana Vikshana is observation of breath. It is slightly different from either of the two practices Bhagavan mentioned, but it is compatible, no doubt, with what Bhagavan's oral approach is. For those who are listening, so there is something called pranayama, where you kind of try to consciously slow down the breath. and so on. Play around. You play around with the breath in various ways. That is pranayama. And then there is prana vikshana. So you don't actually do anything to the breath, but you still are paying your total attention to the breath. So I could choose to, let's say, think of a mantra or think of some image, etc. But then I can choose to just look at what is happening to the breath. Notice the breath. That noticing the breath as it arises goes all the way, the air flowing in and the air flowing out is prana vikshana. The Buddhists have specialized in that for many reasons, because it gives you a certain breakthrough into the mind and its functioning. So that's why they have focused on that in the Vipassana methods. But for sure, prana vikshana is observation of breath, also a very helpful practice. Like I said, you don't do anything to the breath, just observe its movement and magically it slows down. Okay, that's by the way. Yeah, that's the answer. Prana vikshana is correct. It's also a helpful practice.
Thank you for that, sir. The last question is from Sushil Motwaniji. He asks, and I quote, "Can breath control also help in Vairagya?" Unquote.
Yes, can breath control also help in Vairagya? The answer is this: indirectly, but not directly. Indirectly, because when the breath is controlled, the mind tends to get less into distressing emotions, distressful worrying, neurotic tendencies, those get reduced. Once the mind's neurotic tendencies of worrying and planning, over planning, not like simple planning, overdoing it, over worrying, that gets a little reduced, then you can have that space to bring in Vairagya. So what is Vairagya? Remember, Viragasya bhavaha Vairagyaha. Having total objectivity about whatever is in front of you, that is Vairagya. If you're 100% objective, you're already on a way, you're really way forward on the path of Vairagya. And whereas there is subjectivity, my own superimposition, there is no Vairagya. So when you do pranayama, mind's distressful emotions come down, you have more space to be objective or develop the Vairagya. So indirectly it supports, but not directly, won't directly be Vairagya.
Thank you, sir. There is a strong string of thank yous and just a lot of gratitude for your session today. In specific to answering of her question, Germana says thank you and incredibly helpful. And likewise, Ajit Kumarji is also expressing his thanks to you. So thank you, sir.
Yes, we'll meet again.
Namo Ramana. Thank you so much. I would now request Narayananji at the shrine to initiate with, to conclude with Akshar Manamalai and conclude the session with Aarti. Namo Ramana.
அருணாச்சலவரற்கேற்ற அக்ஷரமணமாலை சாற்ற கருணாகர கணபதியே கரம் மருளி காப்பாயே. அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல அருணாச்சலம் என அகமே நினைப்பவர் அகந்தை வேறறுப்பார் அருணாச்சலா. அழகு சுந்தரம் போல் அகமும் நீயும் முற்று தினமாயிருப்போம் அருணாச்சலா. அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா. அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா. அகம்புகுந்தீர்த்துன் அககுகை சிறையாய் அமர்வித்ததென் கொல் அருணாச்சலா. ஆறு காயனை ஆண்டனை அகற்றிடு ஜிலம் பழித்திடும் அருணாச்சலா. அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா. अरुणाचल शिव अरुणाचल शिव अरुणाचल शिव अरुणाचला இப்பழித்தம் உனையே நினைப்பித்தாய் இனி யார் விடுவார் அருணாச்சலா ஈன்றிடும் அன்னையின் பெரிதரும் புரிவோய் இதுவோ உனதருள் அருணாச்சலா அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா உனையே மாற்றி ஓடாதுள்ளத்தின் மேல் உறுதியாய் இருப்பாய் அருணாச்சலா ஊர் சுற்று உளம்பிடாது உன்னை கண்டு அடங்கி உன்னழகை காட்டுணாச்சலா அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா என்னை அழித்திப்போ என்னை கலவாவிடில் துவோ ஆண்மை அருணாச்சலா ஏன் இந்த உறக்கம் என்னை பிறர் இழுக்க இது உனக்கழகோ அருணாச்சலா அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா ஐம்புல கள்வர் அகத்தினில் புகும்போ அகத்தில் நீலையோ அருணாச்சலா ஒருவனா முன்னை மொழி தேவர் வருவார் சூதே இது அருணாச்சலா அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா ஓங்காரம் பொருள் உயர்வில்லை உன்னை யார் அறிவார் அருணாச்சலா அவ்வை போல எனக்குள் அருளை தந்துர ஆழ்வது உன் கடன் அருணாச்சலா அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா அருணாச்சலம் வாழி அன்பர்களும் வாழி அக்ஷரமண மாலை வாழி தீபார்த்தம் சமர்ப்பயாமி தீபார்த்தம் சமர்ப்பயாமி ரமணாய நம ரமணாய நம ரமணாய நம ரமணாய நம ஓம் பூர்புவஸ்வவஸ்வரோயம் भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो न प्रचोदयात् देवदत्तस्य सत्यं दर्शने प्रसन्नामि अमृतं स्वां प्राणाय स्वाहा आवाने स्वां ज्ञाने स्वां उदाने समाने स्वां ब्रह्मणे स्वाहा ओम नमो भगवते श्री अरुणाचल रमणाय नमः नमो भगवते श्री अरुणाचल रमणाय नमः नमो भगवते श्री अरुणाचल रमणाय नमः राजा ने मतात्याय मुरगावे सामने बच्चे भैरवानंदी वैसरा शिव पार्वती नमः शिवाय नमः शिवाय नमः शिवाय नमः शिवाय नमः उदगंड गोसीरम निवेद्यं समर्पयामि मध्ये मध्ये पानीयं समर्पयामि अमृतं समुद्रावसं समर्पयामि नीराजनं समर्पयामि नीराजनं महास्मनीयं समर्पयामि सूदीवन समायुक्तं नागवल्ली तलयोर्धं कर्पूर्ण सूर्ण संयुक्तं प्रतिगुजां कर्पूर नीराजनं श्रीरमणं हरिशिक्के समर्पयामि। ओम नमो भगवते श्री रघुनाथ श्री रमणाय नमः। नमो भगवते श्री रघुनाथ श्री रमणाय नमः। नमो भगवते श्री रघुनाथ श्री रमणाय नमः। कात्याय नमः, दुर्गाय नमः, देवाय नमः, सुब्रह्मण्याय नमः, स्वामिनाथाय नमः, दक्षिणामूर्तये नमः। नटराजा भैरवा नंदीवराय पार्वतीये नमः। ओम नमः शिवाय, नमः शिवाय, ओम नमः शिवाय, नमः शिवाय, ओम नमः शिवाय, नमः शिवाय नमः। सोमो वा एकस्य राजमानस्य यो राजासं राजो वा सोमेरते देवस्वामेतानि यमजीवन्ति यदा लोको वै देवानस्वा देवात्मस्वान् चैतन्ति ते नमस्तं ते राजाय देवसुराजा भवति तदत्र गुरुवादकदारमेवां गुरुवादकुले अमेवां गुरुवादकं सत्यवादकं विवादं कर्पूरनीराजनं श्रीरमणमहिषं कात्य दुनिया स्वामी दक्षिणामूर्तये राजा भैरवान् समर्पयामि। यो भाव पुष्पं वेद पुष्पवान् प्रजावान् पुष्पवान् भवति चन्द्रमा भावा पुष्पं पुष्पं पुष्पवान् प्रजावान् पुष्पवान् भवति। ओम तत् ब्रह्मा, ओम तत् वायु, ओम तत् आत्मा, ओम तत् सत्यम, ओम तत् सर्वम, ओम तत् पुरो नमः। अंतर्ज्ञान भूते च गुहाया विश्वमूर्तिषु तम जगन्नाथं वसत्कारं निन्द्रं रुद्रं तम विष्णुं ब्रह्मं प्रजापति। ओम तथा बोधोत्थितो ब्रह्मपुरस्सरो न कर्मणां प्रजेयादने नित्यानेके अमृतत्वमानसु परेण नाहं नित्यं गुहायं विप्राजते दत्यदियो विशन्ति वेदांत विज्ञानसे नित्यदाता संन्यास यात्रा प्रगति सुखसत्त्वा ते ब्रह्मलोके परान्तकाले परामुखात् परिमुच्यन्ति सर्वे कारं विभावं परमेकं यत् पुण्डरीकं प्रवत्य सकुंसदं तत्रावित्तकर्मकग्नं दिशोगत् तस्मिन्यन्त तद्वादित्यं यो वेदान्तौ स्वरूपतो वेदान्तस्य प्रतिष्ठितः तस्य प्रकृतिलीनस्य परतमैश्वरः मन्त्रपुष्पं रमणमहर्षिं समर्पयामि। कात्याय मुरुगावळिं सुब्रह्मण्य स्वामिनाथने दक्षिणामूर्तये नटराजा भैरवा नंदीवैश्वराजं समर्पयामि। ओम नमः शिवाय, ओम नमः शिवाय, ओम नमः शिवाय, ओम नमः शिवाय। नारायण पावारी जन्मात्र पितानि च तानि तानि विनश्यन्ति प्रवर्तन पदे पदे।
Namo Ramana. This brings us to the closure of today's satsang with Raghav ji for devotees of Ramana Kendra Delhi and others. We shall meet Raghav ji next month on the last Sunday of, on the last Sunday of the Namo Ramana.